Welcome, music lovers. Today, we embark on a profound and moving journey through the 10 most tragic stories in the history of music. These are the lives of geniuses who transformed the world with their melodies, but whose paths were marked by pain, loss, and struggle. Stay until the end, because I'll share a list of the best books for musicians that will allow you to delve deeper into these fascinating stories. If you like the video, subscribe to not miss more stories like these. Ludwig van Beethoven. The Symphony of Solitude. Ludwig van Beethoven, born in 1770 in Bonn, Germany, is a name that resonates as a synonym for musical genius. His symphonies, sonatas, and quartets have defined classical music, but his life was a constant struggle against adversity. From a young age, Beethoven showed extraordinary talent. His father, Johann, a frustrated and alcoholic musician, recognized this gift and decided to exploit it mercilessly. He forced young Ludwig to practice for hours, sometimes until midnight, with physical punishments if he didn't comply. This stolen childhood left deep scars but also forged an unbreakable determination. At 17, Beethoven traveled to Vienna to study with Mozart, who, according to legend, said, "This young man will make the world talk." But tragedy soon struck. His beloved mother died, and Beethoven had to return to Bonn to care for his younger siblings, taking on overwhelming responsibilities. Then, in his 20s, as his career as a pianist and composer began to flourish in Vienna, he noticed something devastating. He was losing his hearing. At first, it was an annoying buzzing, but it soon became progressive deafness. For a musician, this was worse than death. He tried to hide it, using ear trumpets and asking people to shout, but the reality was relentless. Beethoven wrote in his diary, known as the Heiligenstadt Testament, his despair. "For me, there can be no joy in human society, nor in conversation, nor in the mutual exchange of ideas." But then, instead of giving up, he channeled his pain into his music. He composed Symphony No. 3, the Eroica, a revolutionary work that broke the rules of its time. Then came the Fifth Symphony, with its iconic ta-ta-ta-ta, a cry of defiance against fate. And finally, the Ninth Symphony, a hymn to joy created by a man who could barely hear. How did he do it? Some say he felt the vibrations of his piano. Others that his genius lived in his mind, beyond the senses. But deafness wasn't his only tragedy. Beethoven longed for love but never found it. He fell in love several times, especially with women of higher social classes, like the mysterious, immortal beloved, to whom he wrote passionate letters he never sent. His proposals were rejected, perhaps due to his gruff character, disheveled appearance, or deafness. He lived alone, surrounded by scores, in a messy apartment, and his health deteriorated over the years. In 1827, at 56, he died during a storm with a raised fist, as if defying the heavens. His legacy is eternal, but his life was a symphony of solitude and struggle. Beethoven teaches us that art can be born from the deepest pain, illuminating even the darkest shadows. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. The prodigy who fell into misery. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, born in 1756 in Salzburg, was a musical miracle. At 3, he played the harpsichord. At 5, he composed. And at 12, he had already written operas. His father, Leopold, a respected musician, saw in him an opportunity to achieve glory. But this ambition came at a cost. Leopold took Wolfgang and his sister Nannerl on exhausting tours across Europe, showcasing them as prodigies. The children performed for kings and nobles, but the days were endless, and Wolfgang barely had a childhood. This made him a genius but also a young man dependent on others' approval. In his 20s, Mozart decided to break free from his father and forge his own path in Vienna. He wanted to be an independent composer, a rarity in an era when musicians relied on patrons. He wrote masterpieces like The Marriage of Figaro, Don Giovanni, and The Magic Flute, but artistic success didn't translate into financial stability. Vienna was an expensive city, and Mozart, with his taste for fine clothes and parties, accumulated debts. Then, his wife Constance fell ill repeatedly, increasing medical expenses. The society of the time didn't value composers as we do today. Mozart depended on commissions that often didn't come. His health began to fail. Fevers, joint pains, and an unexplained fatigue. In 1791, at 35, while working on his Requiem, a work commissioned by a mysterious stranger, his body gave out. He died in poverty, leaving Constance with debts and 2 young children. His body was thrown into a common grave, an unworthy end for a man whose genius defined an era. But then, his music conquered the world, becoming a symbol of eternal beauty. Mozart's tragedy reminds us that talent, no matter how immense, doesn't always shield against the cruelty of fate. Frédéric Chopin. The sick poet of the piano Frédéric Chopin, born in 1810 in Zelazowa Wola, Poland, was the poet of the piano. His nocturnes, waltzes, and ballades are pure emotion, but his life was a canvas of fragility and pain. From childhood, he showed a unique sensitivity for music. His family, though not wealthy, supported his talent, and by 20, he was a celebrated pianist and composer in Warsaw. But Chopin dreamed of more. He moved to Paris, the cultural epicenter of Europe, seeking fame. He achieved it, but at an immense cost. Chopin suffered from frail health, likely tuberculosis or a similar lung disease. Every winter, his cough worsened, and doctors recommended warm climates he couldn't always afford. Then, he met George Sand, an eccentric and free-spirited writer who became both his muse and his torment. At first, Sand cared for him, taking him to Majorca to rest. But the damp climate worsened his health, and the relationship turned stormy. Sand, a strong and dominant woman, clashed with Chopin's sensitivity. Eventually, she left him, leaving him emotionally shattered. Chopin kept composing, creating works like the Sonata No. 2 with its famous funeral march. But his body couldn't endure. In 1848, he gave his last concert in Paris, barely able to play due to lack of breath. He died in 1849, at 39, surrounded by friends but consumed by illness. Fulfilling his wish, his heart was taken to Poland, preserved in alcohol, while his body remained in Paris. Chopin left us a legacy of fragile beauty, but his life was a constant struggle against a body that couldn't keep up with his soul. A moment for music lovers. If these stories are moving you, I invite you to dive deeper with the best books on classical music. In the description links, you'll find my recommendations, perfect for musicians and enthusiasts. Buying through those links costs you nothing extra but helps me keep creating content about geniuses like Mozart and Beethoven. Check them out and support the channel. Robert Schumann. The mind that fragmented Robert Schumann, born in 1810 in Zwickau, Germany, was the soul of Romanticism. His compositions, like Carnival, Kreisleriana, and his symphonies, are bursts of passion and creativity. But his mind was a whirlwind. From a young age, he showed signs of mental instability, possibly bipolar disorder. There were days when he composed tirelessly, possessed by inspiration, and others when he fell into paralyzing melancholy. This made him unique but also condemned him. Schumann dreamed of being a pianist, but a hand injury, possibly from a device used to strengthen his fingers, forced him to focus on composition. Then, he fell in love with Clara Wieck, a prodigy pianist 9 years younger than him. Her father, Friedrich Wieck, fiercely opposed the relationship, leading to a legal battle to marry. They succeeded in 1840, but happiness was fleeting. The pressure of supporting a family and his mental instability overwhelmed him. He began hearing voices, sometimes celestial melodies, other times demons tormenting him. In 1854, after a suicide attempt by throwing himself into the Rhine River, he was admitted to an asylum. He spent his last 2 years there, separated from Clara and their children, consumed by hallucinations. He died in 1856, at 46, leaving Clara to preserve his legacy while raising their children alone. Schumann's tragedy is that of a man whose genius was intertwined with his suffering, a soul that burned too quickly. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. The Weight of Secrets. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, born in 1840 in Votkinsk, Russia, is the author of immortal works like Swan Lake, The Nutcracker, and the Sixth Symphony. His music is a whirlwind of emotions, but his life was a drama of secrets and internal conflicts. Tchaikovsky was homosexual in a conservative Russia where that was a crime. This truth forced him to live in hiding, constantly fearing discovery. The pressure of maintaining this facade plunged him into constant anxiety. In 1877, seeking normality, he married Antonina Miliakova, an obsessive admirer, but the marriage was a disaster. Tchaikovsky couldn't bear intimacy with her, and the relationship collapsed within weeks, leading him to a nervous breakdown. Then he found solace in his correspondence with Nadezhda von Meck, a wealthy patron who supported him financially on one condition: they never meet in person. This epistolary relationship was one of the few lights in his life, but also a reflection of his isolation. In 1893, days after premiering his Sixth Symphony, known as Pathetique, he died in St. Petersburg at 53. Some say it was cholera. Others that he took his own life due to the pressure of his secret life. His music, full of melancholy and passion, is an echo of his tortured soul. Tchaikovsky teaches us that even in a world that doesn't accept who you are, art can be a refuge. Franz Schubert. The forgotten genius Franz Schubert, born in 1797 in Vienna, was a prolific composer who left over 1,000 works, including symphonies, lieder, and chamber music. But his life was a constant struggle against poverty and indifference. From a young age, he showed exceptional talent, but his shyness and lack of connections kept him in the shadows. He lived with friends, sharing modest rooms, and often relied on them for food. Schubert composed at an astonishing speed, sometimes writing several lieder in a single day. But the Vienna of Beethoven and Mozart didn't give him the recognition he deserved. Then, he contracted syphilis, a common but devastating disease at the time. This weakened his body and spirit, but not his creativity. He composed his unfinished symphony and string quartets in his final years, works now considered gems. He died in 1828 at 31, just as he was beginning to gain some fame. His grave, near Beethoven's, is a reminder of his overlooked greatness. Schubert shows us that true art endures, even when the world doesn't see it. If you're enjoying the video, remember to subscribe. Clara Schumann. The heroine in The Shadows, Clara Schumann, born in 1819 in Leipzig, was much more than Robert Schumann's wife. She was a virtuoso pianist, talented composer, and mother of 8. From childhood, her father, Friedrich Wieck, trained her with brutal discipline to make her a star. At 9, she gave concerts, and by 18, she was a sensation in Europe. But her life was full of sacrifices. She fell in love with Robert Schumann, her father's student, but Friedrich fiercely opposed the relationship, fearing it would ruin Clara's career. After years of struggle, they married in 1840. Then, Robert's mental illness and institutionalization left Clara alone to support their family. She performed tirelessly, taught, and published Robert's works while composing her own in silence. But 19th century society didn't value women composers. Her works, like her lieder and piano concerto, are brilliant but were overshadowed by her husband's. Clara lived until 1896, dying at 77, but never received the recognition she deserved. Her story is a testament to the strength of a woman who, against all odds, kept music and her family's legacy alive. Clara inspires us to value the forgotten heroes behind great names. Giuseppe Verdi. The man who transformed pain. Giuseppe Verdi, born in 1813 in La Roncole, Italy, is the titan of opera. His works, like Rigoletto, La Traviata, and Aida, are pillars of music. But his personal life was a field of tragedies. In his 20s, while working as a local musician, he lost his wife, Margherita, and their 2 young children within 2 years. This pain plunged him into a depression so deep that he swore never to compose again. But then, a friend offered him the libretto for Nabucco. Verdi, reluctant, read it and found inspiration. The opera, premiered in 1842, was a resounding success, bringing him back to music. Then, he faced new challenges. Censorship of his operas, which often criticized power, and the demands of fame. He found love with Giuseppina Strepponi, a singer, but their relationship, initially outside marriage, scandalized society. Despite everything, Verdi kept composing until he was 87, leaving a timeless legacy. His life shows us that pain can be transformed into art that moves the world. Richard Wagner, the genius who divided the world. Richard Wagner, born in 1813 in Leipzig, revolutionized opera with works like Tristan und Isolde and The Ring of the Nibelung. But his life was as grand and chaotic as his music. Wagner was arrogant, extravagant, and constantly fleeing debts. This led him to exile in Switzerland and France, but he never stopped composing. His operas, with their epic stories and massive orchestrations, redefined the genre. His personal life was a whirlwind. He was married to Minna Planer, but the relationship was stormy. Then he fell in love with Cosima, the wife of his friend Hans von Bülow, causing a scandal. Cosima left her husband for Wagner, and together they faced social rejection. But Wagner's greatest tragedy was his ideology. His anti-Semitic writings made him a controversial figure, and his music, though beloved, remains debated for its association with dark ideas. He died in 1883, at 69, leaving an immense but polarizing musical legacy. Wagner reminds us that genius can coexist with profound flaws. Gustav Mahler, the soul that sang to the universe. Gustav Mahler, born in 1860 in Bohemia, was a composer and conductor whose music captures the essence of the human soul. His symphonies, like the Fifth, Ninth, and Das Lied von der Erde, are monuments of emotion and complexity. But his life was a series of losses. He lost several siblings in childhood, and that sadness marked him forever. Then, he faced anti-Semitism, which forced him to convert to Christianity to secure his career as a conductor. He married Alma Schindler, a brilliant but complicated woman. Their marriage was passionate but fraught with tensions, especially due to Alma's infidelities. Then, the death of his eldest daughter, Maria, at 4 years old, devastated him. Mahler channeled his pain into his music, especially in his Ninth Symphony, which many see as a farewell. In 1911, at 50, he died of a heart infection, leaving his 10th Symphony incomplete. Mahler teaches us that music can express what words cannot, giving voice to the deepest emotions. If this journey through the lives of these tragic geniuses moved you, subscribe. And don't forget to check the links in the description to discover the best books for musicians. They're a gateway to the stories and techniques behind classical music. Thanks for supporting the channel, and see you in the next video.